What's up? Yeah, I feel you. I could take a nap like right now. We could cancel the sermon and we could all just like. It would probably be spiritual at this point. I don't know if y'all have been as busy as me. Sometimes a nap can be good for your relationship with Jesus and everybody else. Oh man, my wife. We've had a busy couple weeks, and my wife has a party to go to tonight. And she was like, she's sweet about this stuff. The weekend, she's always super sweet. So she looked at me yesterday, and she was like, "What can I do to just make sure tomorrow's a good day?" And I said, "Can I sleep? Like, can I just sleep when I get home?" And she was like, "Good." So I got mine coming. So we're gonna preach. All right. So this is we're gonna be in Luke chapter 10 today. Let me just say something that I didn't say last week, and I'll explain why. So, the idea of this sermon series is really simple, but I didn't want to say it this way because it carries a little bit of baggage. So the whole idea is this: like we need to retake Christmas, right? Like we need to take Christmas back, but I didn't say it because it has some cultural connotations that I'm not like a huge fan of. Y'all remember when everybody started putting the X instead of Christ in Christmas, and then everybody in the church got real mad? It's like, you got to put Christ back in Christmas, and like we stomp our feet and we made bumper stickers, and you know what I'm talking about? So like that, I don't want to bring that back. You know, like I don't want to say like we need to be like that, because I kind of feel like we missed the mark, you know, like in that time period when that became a big thing. It was like, you got to put Christ back in Christmas, which, okay, I agree with the statement, but like our culture, I mean, if people don't believe in Jesus, why are you going to tell them to put Jesus in Christmas? You know? Now, I know that the holiday is to celebrate him. That's what we're going to talk about. But like, we can't expect for people who don't believe what we believe to believe what we believe. You know what I'm saying? And so like during that time period, it was just like people would get so like outraged. And it was like, you know, you drive by a gas station and it was like Merry Xmas. And like people were like, I can't believe it, you know? And meanwhile, like the gas station owner probably just ran out of R's. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a lot of lowercase R's. You know, and everybody get mad about Santa, and it's like he should get a pass because he probably invented Coca-Cola. Like just can we just look at ourselves? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the problem is that we forget to put Christ in Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Like we forget the point. And so we do need to retake the holiday, but we need to retake the holiday for ourselves. And in finding the meaning in the holiday for ourselves, we will be able to communicate the meaning of the holiday for other people. Yes. And so that's really the whole goal here. And so we're going to talk about being too busy, because I'm sure all of y'all feel, maybe some of you guys are having a great Christmas, and you're like, no, we said no to all the parties. We're only buying gift cards, so we don't have to think about it. And they're all $5 gift cards, so we can still eat food. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe some of you are having that Christmas. I'm not having that Christmas. I don't think I've had a free weekend since before Thanksgiving, you know? And so it just gets busy, you know? And it gets busy, and then you get tired. And so we're going to talk about a story in Luke about a lady who got busy and angry. It's Mary and Martha. So if you've been in the church world for very long, this is a story that always comes up when people are like, hey, you need to take time to make space for Jesus in your life. Now, I always feel like this story ends up in a place where it's like you should be less like Martha and more like Mary. Well, let me read it first anyway. So we're in Luke chapter 10, verse 38. We'll go to verse 42, which is the end of the chapter. So as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So at its basis, this is a story about two sisters who have opposing personalities, right? Like, you probably know people that are like that. You probably have an opposite personality of one of your siblings, if you have siblings, right? And so Mary is unbothered by what's going on and the things that have to be done. And Martha sees the whole list of things that have to be done, right? What I feel like ends up happening is when this story gets talked about, people come away feeling like, be less like Martha and be more like Mary. Like be less like Martha and be more like Mary. Don't be so busy. Don't be so this. Don't worry about all the stuff that has to be done. Be more like Mary and just enjoy things. I don't think that's what's happening here. Like, I think Martha just missed the point. But to take it and apply it to yourself and be like, no, I should just float through life more, like, God made you the way he made you. Be how he made you, you know? And nobody ever says this, but like, they wouldn't have eaten if Martha hadn't been so busy, you know? Like that would have been a terrible party. And by the way, this is just one more time where Jesus is a little bit of an awkward dinner guest because he calls the hostess out like on the spot. So let's unpack how this thing plays out. So Jesus shows up. Here's the problem. We can't quite tell whether it was Jesus and the disciples that came to Martha's house, or whether it was just Jesus. Now, he was walking with his disciples, but sometimes he goes off and does his own thing. So it could just be Jesus. You can imagine that if 13 dudes roll in expecting dinner, this is a nightmare, right? But let's just, it's kind of up in the air. But what does happen is Martha all of a sudden has guests. Now, think about this. In today's day and age, maybe you are somebody who invites yourself to somebody's house. But if you do that, you're going to shoot them a text or give them a call and they'll have some warning. Now, maybe they sent a runner ahead to Martha's house, or maybe Jesus showed up. No matter what, they didn't get a lot of warning, right? And so now all of a sudden, Martha's got to figure out what to do. So she's hurrying and everything else. Now, you gotta remember, this is probably a one-room house, right? It's probably a one-room house. To cook, you have to build a fire. The fire probably stays going consistently, but you got to build it back up to be able to cook. It's not an easy thing to pull off, right? This is not like we're not throwing like microwave dinners in the oven, or you got a frozen pizza. Like, she didn't have frozen pizza, right? So this is a big ordeal that's happening. Jesus shows up, Martha's rushing and hurrying and has all of this stuff to do, and then he just sits down and starts talking. You know, and Martha's got to be, like, you can imagine, right? Like you've done this before. Martha is probably cooking very aggressively, you know? Like, you ever got in a fight with your spouse and like your thing maybe you close the door, you don't slam the door, you just close it really well. Right? Or you get in you get in an argument with your spouse and like you don't throw the dishes around because that would break the dishes, but you don't really care to be quiet about it. So Martha's probably over here cooking real aggressively and Jesus is talking, and she's got to just be like, dude, you just showed up. And then Mary, like, she never helps, right? She never helps. And Martha, I'd imagine, is building this case in her mind as to why everybody in the room is a terrible person. Have you done this before? It's just like, you're bad because you came unannounced, and you're bad because you never help, and I don't even know what's wrong with the dog, but I hate the dog, right? We all have these moments where we begin to lose perspective. So let's not attach the story to the fact that Martha's the type of person who feels like she has to be a good host. How about we just look at it and go, okay, this is what happened. She's stressed out and she lost perspective. That happens to all of us. We have the things that just cause us to go, and we lose perspective. And then in losing perspective, we do what we just talked about. We start building a case as to why everybody around us is just not understanding why they're a terrible person and we're awesome, right? Lots of times what happens is in those moments of stress, you lose perspective, and that loss of perspective leads you to self-righteousness. And I don't mean necessarily like I don't mean like you're a bad person and I'm a great person and I'm gonna tell you how to live your life. I mean self-righteousness in the sense of like, you don't see where you're going wrong here at all, and everybody else around you is going wrong in every direction. Have you ever been in a moment where you just rampage against everyone in your home? Right? And we've all been there, right? And so Jesus walks in, she starts doing what she's doing. She starts losing perspective. She's getting upset. Lord, don't you care? So now she's self-righteous. And then the next thing that happens is what often tends to follow self-righteousness. Lord, don't you care? So first of all, let's just unpack the fact that she called him Lord first. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her what to do. Tell her to help me. You ever prayed that prayer? God, this is not working the way it's supposed to work. Fix it. Right? Self-righteousness in that moment makes way for pride. We've all gone to this place, I'm sure, where we think we know how things are supposed to go. And then in knowing how things are supposed to go, we think that it's okay to tell God to fix our plan because he screwed it up in the first place. That's uncomfortable, right? That's what's happening here. And look, think about this. Let me just keep going. The last thing that happens is what always happens when we get prideful. God humbles Martha. Martha, you have a lot of things on your mind, but only one thing needs to get done right now. And she's doing it. I'm not going to take that from her. Ugh. Right? I feel like this is an experience that in one way or the other we have all experienced. I feel like this is something that in one way or the other we've all been through. And so what do you do with that? You know, I think this time of year leads us to a place where we can end up in a version of that for an extended period of time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just get busy, and it's one thing after the other, and it's one thing after the other, and it's one thing after the other, and it's constant. It doesn't stop. And then when it doesn't stop, you start to lose perspective, and then you're going to go, I mean, dude, how many of you have had dinner coming up with your family? You love your family, but also your family stresses you out a little bit. You're really busy. You have a million things to do. And in preparing for the dinner with your family, you get really like, just, this is terrible. I don't want to do this. This is awful, whatever. You walk into it. It's the one time a year you're going to spend time with your family. You go in there and you get in there and you're like, this is going to be awful. And then by the end of it, you're like, man, I wish that I had just, I wish I had just relaxed, you know? So how do we fix it? Like, what do we do with that? And the answer is what Mary does. So Martha misses the mark. She doesn't see Jesus. She's got a million things to do, and she just doesn't even realize what's happening, right? Mary doesn't care how Martha feels. And, right? So Mary does three things that I think are very helpful, and I think can help us just deal. I think it honestly helps us deal with life in general. So the first thing that Mary does is she removes distractions, right? You're like, well, where's that in the story? It's 4 verses, dude. Like, okay. It's a one-room house. Martha's likely cooking over a fire. In most of these scenarios, the animals live either right outside the house or in the house. So there's animals, there's fire, there might be 12 other dudes there. It's loud, there's a lot going on. Martha's probably cooking as aggressively as possible. And keep in mind, she doesn't keep her flour in a Tupperware container or a paper bag, right? This is probably in a big jar that's going to be allowed to open and allowed to close, and there's a lot going on and everything else. So what does Mary do? She places herself at the feet of Jesus. That is the best that she could possibly do to remove the distractions that would keep her from hearing from Jesus, that would keep her from focusing on Jesus. Now, that's a huge thing, removing distraction. Like in our world, that's the hardest thing to do. One of the hardest things to do. Like you walk around, these are driving me nuts. You walk around every day. You walk around every day and you carry in your pocket access to all of the distractions. As a matter of fact, the entire goal of about half of the apps that people my age group and younger use is to distract you for 7 seconds or 15 seconds at a time. So that then you can scroll up or over or whichever app you're on and be distracted again. But not just that, like all the information in the world that you could ever possibly know is there. So you have all of that. Like just like let's just say you are making space for Jesus and you're trying to figure that out. I would venture to assume that some of you have been sitting down, reading your Bible or whatever it is that you do to make space for Jesus. You're doing that and you come across something and you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. Let me Google it. So then you Google it. Now, this is a good thing to do. But then 20 minutes later, after you've looked at the news, checked the scores from the game the night before, and done all of this other stuff, you've been distracted. Yeah. It's hard to do. The second thing that Mary does is she makes time to listen. And in this one, she's downright brutal. Like, super duper brutal. You know Mary knew that Martha was going to be mad at her, right? Like, you know. You know she knew that Martha was going to be mad at her. They're sisters, dude. They've had this fight before. I had brothers, right? We would, like, punch each other, and then it would be over. I don't know what it's like to have a sister, but I'm watching 2 daughters right now. And let me just say, like, one's 4 and one's almost 2, so it's not real yet, but I can see it coming. Because they'll be fighting over a toy, and all of a sudden my house will erupt. And it'll be these screams that I can't even make that noise. It's like, y'all know like the sounds that the raptors in Jurassic Park makes? That noise will just come at 2 different pitches in my house. And then all of a sudden somebody will come running up to me, right? You know Mary knew she was punching Martha's buttons. You know it. And she didn't care. She made the space. She made the time. Now, in your personal life, it's probably not a great idea to intentionally anger your spouse or other family members to make the time. I would say that that's bad planning, right? To just be like, I'm reading my Bible. Like don't pull the moral high ground card. Like, I'm reading my Bible, leave me alone. Slam the door, right? Like, that's, so like, you know how some people use the bathroom as their private time? Like, I'm gonna go poop, I'll be back in like a half hour. Sorry, we're just going there. Like, don't turn listening to Jesus into your poop time. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's what I mean. So, you probably should make a plan. Yeah, it was dignified almost until we got there. You should make a plan. You should make a plan. Like, if you're married, you should talk to your spouse, and you guys should figure out, like, this is the time I gotta make to spend time with Jesus. I'm gonna do this time. And then you should defend it for one another, right? Because it's so, like, especially right now, like, this is kind of rough that like this laid out this week, right? Because I'm sure you all have Christmas parties and everything else to go to. You have a million things to do, whatever, right? And we're talking about making time, and you're like, where's the time? What time? The problem is you'll never have the time unless you plan to make the time. You know, so for me, like, I'm Just like full disclosure, I'm not good at this part of it. Like it's the time piece. I'm not good at this part of it. I'm not good at the distraction piece either. I'm not great at this. But the time piece specifically, like, look, I'm not a morning person at all. Like, I get up at 5:30 every Sunday. And you guys are like, I think the expectation of a pastor is that they would get up early on Sunday so that they could pray and prepare and be spiritual and everything. I get up at 5:30 on every Sunday so that my eyes aren't tired by 9 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? So that I can say words by 8:30. Because it takes me hours to be straight, to be good, to have coherent thoughts. I'm just not a morning person. And so for me though, the best time to make the time is in the morning because I work and then I get home. And when I get home, I want to spend time with my wife and kids and I want to pay attention to them. And then they go to bed. And then, dude, just to be honest, if I'm trying to read my Bible after everybody's in bed, it ain't happening. I'm distracted. I'm going to do a million other things. I'm going to think about every other thing. I'm going to spend most of the time that I'm trying to connect with Jesus talking to myself about how I shouldn't walk through the refrigerator and eat whatever's in there. So the morning is the best time. And so I go through these periods where I'm really good in the morning and everything else. And then I go through these periods where I'm really not. And making the time's tough. But the problem is you don't keep the perspective if you don't remove the distractions. You don't keep the perspective in the midst of life. You notice I'm not saying get less busy. Anybody catch that? I think a lot of times we think, oh man. Sometimes when we let ourselves get down the road of trying to be more spiritual, we can mistake laziness for godliness. Because it's all that person does is this and that. And it's dude, Jesus was all this person does is they pray and they read their Bible and they just think on this stuff and they ponder this stuff and this and that and the other thing. It's that stuff is all great, but if you're not being productive, then you're not doing what God called you to do. It's maybe some of you do need to get less busy, but maybe some of y'all need to get more busy. You know what I'm saying? And so just don't mistake laziness for godliness. It's not the same. Jesus did make time to commune with God. He walked off into the wilderness and he made time. But also Jesus was always busy. And that's the tension that we're supposed to live in. We're supposed to live in this tension between doing the things that God has asked me to do, doing the things to be productive, doing the things that represent him well, and doing the things that ultimately fulfill the plan for our lives that he made. And also making the time for him and making the space for him and making the space to commune with him. This is a tension that we have to fight for all the time. And that's the third one. That's the third thing that Mary does. She's not bothered by doing steps 1 or 2. And I think that's the most important thing, right? Remove distractions, make the time to listen, and don't be bothered by what you have to do steps 1 and 2. I think a lot of times the thing that holds us back from spending the time we need with the God we love so that we can maintain good perspective and so that we can be healthy, the thing that holds us back the most is the guilt that it takes to defend the time, the guilt that comes from defending the time. Does that make sense? There are a million things you got to do. And you got people pulling on you left and right. You got all of this stuff going on. And it's hard. Dude, life is hard to figure out. And there are going to be times where to spend time with God, you're going to have to sacrifice some other things. And the guilt creeps in and it causes you to just go, I'll go do something else. I'll go do this. I'll go do that. And then the next thing you know, you're not making the time anymore. You're not removing the distractions anymore. The most amazing thing to me about this entire thing is that Mary doesn't say a word. Right? You would expect her to defend herself. They're sisters after all. right? You would expect for her to say something. She doesn't. She's just unbothered by it in general. So make the plans you got to make to defend the time. Do the things you got to do so you can set it up. And then don't let yourself feel guilty about the things you've had to do to meet with Jesus. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the whole reason that like all of this, wax on, wax off, I just realized I did that. The whole reason that all of this really, once you get to brass tacks, that this all matters is that the things that God does for you won't matter to you unless his presence is real for you, right? His provision won't be powerful to you if his presence isn't real for you. His provision won't be powerful to you unless his presence is real for you. That's the missing piece in the Christmas conversation. We don't see what Jesus did on Christmas as meaningful because we are not spending the time with him to see how much he provided in that moment. We don't see the importance in it. We don't see the depth of it. We don't see it as for how much it provided for us, right? We just don't see it because we're too busy, because we miss it, because we're not making space for him. Like it's just another thing. All you see is the things you have to do that surround the holiday. And look, don't hear me being mean to anybody. But we should not be able to walk into church or in the Christmas season and be like, I hate Christmas. But we do because we hate all the stuff around it. But if we made the space to meet with Jesus and we remembered how important and how big the moment was, we wouldn't say that, because instead of being distracted by all the noise, we'd be focused on him. And that's the thing. We recognize that principle in every other relationship in our lives. If you're frustrated with your spouse, have you ever caught yourself being like, oh man, you walk in the door and your first reaction is, oh no. Yeah, has anybody ever been in this place? Please, somebody say yes. 100%. Right? Because you know that you missed something, you didn't do something, you did something wrong. So you walk in the door of your house and you should be excited to see your spouse. This is the love of your life. You should be excited to see this person. But instead you walk in the door and you're overcome with dread because you forgot something or you did something wrong. And you know that you have an unmet expectation, and that unmet expectation is gonna lead to a conflict, and you just don't wanna have the conflict. In that moment, what's the answer to fixing that? You just need to spend more time with the person. You need to go on a date. You need to remember why you love them in the first place, because you married this person because you love them in a way that is overarching. You love this person in a way that covers their shortcomings. You knew, listen, when my wife married me, she knew I was going to be a mess. She had seen how messy I was. She had been in my car. It's a nightmare, right? I would imagine that if we're not connecting and we're not spending enough time together, that the mess that I make would become very frustrating. And if we are spending enough time together, the mess that I make is a little bit less frustrating. So we recognize this principle for all the other relationships in our lives, but we miss it with Jesus. So we walk through periods like this, or we walk through dark periods in our lives, and we just feel like God's not good, like he's not good to me, like he's not providing the things that I need, like he's not good enough, like it's not working. And instead of looking at it like we look at every other relationship in our lives and go, man, I should probably just invest more time here, because something's missing. If I'm like this messed up, something's missing and I need perspective. Instead of doing that, we just kind of let ourselves go through life and we say spiritual things like, it's just dry right now. I'm just in the winter season of my spirit. And we blow it off. When, like, the answer's really, really simple. You forgot to defend the time that you spend with him. You got too distracted. You let the busyness win. And now, you're losing perspective. Right? In your relationship with God, your prayers are becoming self-righteous. Why aren't you coming through for me? We can, I don't know. I'm not going to put this on you, but I sometimes will pray those prideful prayers of like, why won't you just fix it? Like somehow I can tell God what to do, right? There's a little bit of Mary and a little bit of Martha in all of us. But I just did what I didn't want to do. But you got to let the Mary side win out. I always hate juxtaposing the sisters like one's better than the other. I think that's dumb. But in this moment, she's right. And you got to let that win out. You got to remove the distractions. You got to make the time to listen. By the way, on the listening part, I skipped over this. On the listening part, I've sat in church services and heard pastors say, you need to listen to God, you need to listen to God. And that can be the most frustrating phrase in the world. Because you sit there and you pray and you pray and you pray, and then you're like, man, you could talk back. You know what I'm saying? Like, the thing about it is, like, there are times when God does speak to me. The way that works for me is that I'll be praying, and then all of a sudden I'll know something that I didn't know right before. I'll know the answer to the thing I'm looking for, and I didn't know it 2 seconds earlier. You get what I'm saying? But on the listening piece, sometimes listening is sitting in silence and making that part of your prayer life. But sometimes listening is reading your Bible because he said a whole lot. And then sometimes listening is reading a book that somebody wrote that kind of unpacks the Bible. Sometimes listening is worship music. Sometimes listening is a podcast that speaks about biblical stuff. Like, all of that can be lumped into listening. So don't be frustrated if you're not like walking around talking with God out loud and he's just like booming in your head. I can't find anybody that's experiencing that on a regular basis. But he will speak to your heart through the tools he's given you, you know. But we have to get rid of the distractions. We have to make the room to listen, and we have to be unbothered by what it takes to do the first two. Because I think the biggest, I don't know the right word because I don't want to be mean. I think the biggest failure on our part when it comes to Christmas is that we've allowed ourselves to say over and over and over and over again, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. When we should be saying, I'm so blessed. Yes. And that sounds trite. Like, I know that it doesn't sound deep. It doesn't sound, I don't know, it sounds like something that is written on one of those things that you buy at Hobby Lobby, you know? But it's true. Unpack Christmas for just a second. This book, basically, all of this chronicles thousands of years. And in those thousands of years, it tells the story of how God is setting everything up so that he can unleash himself onto the world and fix what's broken. He spends thousands of years setting everything up so that Jesus can step into the picture, and instead of there being sin and brokenness and death everywhere, there can be love and forgiveness and grace. That's why Christmas matters. It's not about the baby in the manger. It's about the God that it's not just the baby in the manger and the cute and all this stuff. It's about the God that entered our reality and is beginning the process to change everything. And so if we don't take the time during the time that we're supposed to be celebrating that to like look at it and be like, oh my God, you're so good. We just missed the boat. We just forgot to put Christ in Christmas. So you're probably not going to get less busy unless you just decide that you're not going to a whole bunch of stuff you already said you're going to. You're probably not going to get less busy. But you can still make this Christmas more meaningful than the last one. By making space for him in the holiday that celebrates what he did in the first place. Let me pray. God, thank you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for changing everything. Thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for giving us hope because we've been forgiven and because you've extended us grace. God, I pray that you would give us the discipline and the desire to just make room for you. Help us get rid of distractions. There's a lot of them. Help us get them out of the way. Help us make the time. And God, help us make good plans so that we don't have to feel guilty about it. Give us the strength to defend the plans. Give us the strength to defend the time, and give us the strength to not be distracted. Let us focus on you so that instead of feeling busy and frustrated and losing perspective and not seeing all of the amazing things that you've done, that instead of all of that we could actually experience the power and the awe and the gratefulness that comes with seeing the things that you've done for us and the things that you are doing for us. Lord, help us change ourselves so that we can see you more clearly. We love you and we thank you. Amen.